Welcome to the channel. Chapter 1. Everything and anything that concerns us is experience. We cannot consciously do anything outside of experiencing. Suffering and dissatisfaction are part of our experience. These are not something we are physically in. As such, if we control the inputs that are solely responsible for the entirety of our experience, we gain control over our destiny. Step 1. Establish what the system will be applied to. Step 2. Gain the awareness of what we are experiencing. Step 3. Determine whether or not we have the possibility to consciously affect the inputs that result in what the system is being applied to. Step 4. Determine the inputs and the process that result in what the system is being applied to. It is time to apply the 4-step system to experience itself. Via this analysis, we will reach the point where we will discover the inputs and the process that result in experience itself. We know we are applying the 4-step system to experience itself, and so we have step 1 from our system covered. However, when we move on to step 2, what we are experiencing, is not something tangible or obvious. Most individuals believe we live in reality and are thus obviously engaged in said reality. However, this notion is erroneous. Establishing what we do not experience, reality. In order to understand what it is we are experiencing, we first have to clarify that the aforementioned is actually not reality. Most people believe that we are indeed experiencing reality, and consequently, that experience is derived from reality. However, this is not the case. If we were to ask somebody if they live, exist in reality, they would answer that yes, they obviously do, and they would not be wrong. If we then proceed to ask them if they experience reality, their answer will also likely be affirmative. They will proceed to point to trees, buildings, people, etc., and state that all their surroundings are inarguably real. And so, if they are seeing it, indeed they are experiencing reality. Unfortunately, they would be mistaken this time. Being in reality and experiencing reality are two diametrically different things. If we wish to discover what we are experiencing, we have to first rectify this erroneous notion that we are somehow experiencing reality. Why we believe we experience reality. This inability to acknowledge that we do not experience reality does not stem from incorrect analysis, rather, simply from an underlying passive assumption that, instead of triggering an action, serves to inhibit an action, or rather, an analysis. This passive assumption is that we experience reality. In other words, the main inhibitor which keeps us from realizing that we do not experience reality is that our experiencing reality is considered such a given condition. Never does it cross the mind of the average individual to give this state of affairs a second thought, much less to acknowledge the consequential implications of this assessment upon their life experience. There are, of course, areas in philosophy that are dedicated entirely to the pursuit and development of existential knowledge, but for the average individual, this is completely out of sight and out of mind. When it comes to questioning what we are experiencing, many people believe that the only consequential piece of information is that we are physically in reality. So long as we know we are in reality, what else could we be experiencing aside from said reality, and what possible consequences could this have? To them, there is no distinction between experience and the physical body. And again, this does not arise from an incorrect analysis of the situation, but is simply a passive assumption that negates the need for any further examination due to lack of perceived utility. We function under the unconscious precept that we are experiencing reality. This is the underlying notion we must automatically default to, unless the individual dedicates themselves to some form of analysis pertaining to experience or to our existential circumstances. Note: recall from our video game example that what we are experiencing does not necessarily have to be in accordance with our body. Our body can be in something, but we do not necessarily have to be experiencing that something. And what we are concerned with changing is our experience. After all, we are not physically in suffering or dissatisfaction. We are experiencing these. Anything that develops from a thought process questioning this assumption that we experience reality is simply deemed as superfluous, and though it admittedly makes for interesting conversation, many individuals really do not care to dwell upon this much due to how this topic seemingly has no consequence upon their day-to-day life. However, this could not be further from the truth. The lack of interest, due to lack of perceived pragmatism, on behalf of the general population regarding areas of study such as metaphysics, is what has kept humanity as a whole in the dark regarding our capacity to consistently affect our life experience in a conscious and meaningful manner. Consequences of believing we experience reality. The moment we believe that what we are experiencing is reality, we stop looking to understand our general circumstances and thus cannot discover, much less affect, the inputs that are directly responsible for creating said circumstances. Note: for the most part, we interpret reality as a state of experience. However, we will come to understand that reality is indeed not a state of experience, but rather is everything, the totality. It is not the means by which we experience everything, it is everything itself. The truth that most of the population cannot consciously affect the inputs that result in experience itself is and has been subtly present within the human mind throughout countless civilizations and cultures via the concept we know as destiny. It is a shared common sentiment among the masses that although we possess a certain degree of influence upon the direction our lives take, there's a predetermined path or set of circumstances we have little to no say over, and we have come to know this phenomenon as destiny. The more accurate truth is that this phenomenon is not really a thing that exists, but rather a conceptual explanation we engineered to justify our lacking capacity to affect our life experience in a conscious and meaningful manner, to consistently guide our life experience in the direction of our choosing. Destiny is essentially an expression of our helplessness regarding the state of our own life experience. This concept has not developed coincidentally. It has done so due to the shared experience of the many across the ages who have felt what can best be described as an inescapable fate. This fate is expressed as something that no matter how hard one tries, how much one struggles, cannot be changed. Now keep in mind that this is not the way things are for everybody. But regrettably, a grand majority of individuals share this experience. So much so that everybody is knowledgeable of the concepts of destiny and fate, or some variation of these. These are present regardless of which belief system is undertaken, what point in time, or what culture is referenced. We as humanity have mostly been incapable of changing our life experience in a conscious and meaningful manner due to lack of awareness pertaining to experience itself. And the terms discussed here are perfect testaments to this sentiment, which has held true across time. We have not taken the time to analyze experience itself, due to, at some level, believing that we already know what we are experiencing, and that this is reality. Think about Gino and the video game. Imagine if he spent all his time trying to change the theme and the objective of the game by playing it. Since he does not know any better, he will simply spend his days in frustration, which will only grow with the passage of time, attempting to change something from a position from which it is impossible to do so. This is mostly what many people have been doing regarding their life experience. How is it that we are in reality, yet we do not experience reality? In order to understand how it is that we do not experience reality, we will go in the direction of our sense organs and analyze what exactly it is that they do. Our sense organs allow us to interact with our environment by picking up on certain information/stimuli from our surroundings. Our five senses receive the information, which is then interpreted by our mind in order to afford us our sensory experience, which is comprised of hearing, tasting, smelling, seeing, and feeling. This is part of what comes to form our life experience. However, our sense organs are limited in the range of information they can pick up from the stimulus in the environment, meaning that we are limited to a specific range of whatever the respective unit of measurement is for each particular sense organ. For example, we can only hear sounds within a certain range of frequency, measured in hertz. If the sound lies outside of this range, we cannot detect it, even though it is there. Not only are we limited in this matter, but also how can we be certain there is no additional information we are ill-equipped to detect simply because we lack the adequate sense organs to do so? Point here is that very obviously what we are experiencing, as determined in step 2, the basis of our interaction with the environment, is not ever what actually is reality. As such, we never experience reality, but rather an interpretation of it. Via our analysis, we can come to the agreement that reality is not a state of experience, as it has nothing to do with experience. Thus, we must ask ourselves, what exactly is reality if it is not the manner by which we experience the universe? Reality is obviously something, but what is it? We view reality as a state of experience via which we experience the universe. However, reality is not a state of experience, nor can it ever be. It is to be accurately understood as a synonym for the universe rather than our experience of it. We do not experience reality and live in the universe. We are in reality/the universe. Only when we believe we experience reality, and thus are enabled to see reality for what it truly is, are reality and the universe two distinct and separate things. Granted, if reality is synonymous with the universe, reality is the totality. Why we cannot understand reality? It is crucial to acknowledge not only that we cannot experience reality, but also that we cannot understand it. For if we believe we can understand reality/the universe, we must somehow be experiencing it, even if it is in an indirect manner. or have access to this. Understanding the reality of a single object. In order for us to comprehend the impossibility of understanding reality, let us start by analyzing what understanding the reality of just one object would entail. We can appreciate that, hypothetically speaking, understanding the reality of a single object would imply knowing the totality of all the attributes pertaining to said object as they are in a specific moment in time. However, once we initiate the process of establishing the observations so as to obtain the information we seek, we soon inevitably run into a systematic issue. We are only capable of observing one attribute at a time, at any given moment. We can choose to observe the smell, the texture, the taste, the size, or any other attribute we can imagine, but we have to do so one at a time. In any given moment, we have to ignore many more of the object's attributes than what we are acknowledging. Notice the term being used is observe, not experience. We can indeed experience more than one attribute of an object at a time, but we cannot observe, understand, more than one at a time. Observation, as used here, implies thinking about, understanding, or recording, grasping via the means of our cognitive ability. Note: keep in mind that we are demonstrating here that we cannot understand reality. We have already shown that we do not experience reality. Simply because we can experience more than one attribute of something at a time does not mean we experience its reality. This is due to the limitation of our sense organs. Observation takes place in the moment only, and in the moment we cannot acknowledge all the attributes of the object simultaneously. Well, that is not really an issue, one might say. We can simply observe one attribute at a time and record it. Thus, when we are finished, we will have a complete understanding of the object via our recordings pertaining to all the attributes of said object. This assumption, however, is incorrect, as we are sorely mistaken. We are mistaken because things are constantly changing. By the time we observe another aspect, the attribute we previously recorded might have already changed. Of course, this is not guaranteed that it did change, but it might have, and it might have done so in ways that are imperceptible to us due to the minuteness of the changes. Therefore, recording attributes of an object across time, not within the same moment, does not give us the reality of the object. Not to mention that an attribute pertaining to the object could have slipped our mind in our analysis. This totality of attributes could essentially be infinite, as our imagination is both our means of discovery and our limitation. The point is that although the attributes might have not changed, we can never be sure. This can never be verified because we cannot ever see the whole picture, the reality of it. Now, if one is really stubborn, one can claim that multiple individuals can observe the multiple attributes of the object simultaneously, and thus attain the reality of said object within a given moment. However, the problem of omission persists here. It is not guaranteed that all the attributes are being accounted for. This can never be guaranteed. Not to mention what has already been explored, we do not experience reality due to the limitations of our sense organs. No matter what, one simply does not know what one is emitting. We can only account for attributes we can imagine and have the sense organs required to detect. Interpretation can never be removed from the equation completely, so that nothing but objectivity remains. Pure objectivity can only take place when there is no observation and the object simply is. If and when an observer is introduced, there is always interpretation and thus limitation. The observer defines what is considered to be attributes and what is considered to be accurate recording practices. In this way, even before we begin our observation, we have already restricted said observation and have lost at our attempt to observe the totality. We hopefully see the impossibility of understanding the reality of a single object. But what does a single object matter? What we are interested in is understanding reality itself. And so, let us expand our thought experiment from one object to reality. Understanding reality. Obviously, if we cannot understand the reality of a single object, we cannot hope to understand reality. If we cannot observe all the attributes of a single object at once, imagine the magnitude of the task of doing so for everything simultaneously. What experiencing reality would entail. Required conditions. We would have to have the means, ability to gather all the information regarding our environment via our sense organs. Not just our direct environment, but the entirety of the universe. We would need to have the knowledge pertaining to how every single fundamental unit within reality relates to every other fundamental part, the smallest unit of matter/energy. We would have to have the ability to collect this data at the exact same moment. And even if all the above conditions were met, we would only have the interaction with reality for that specific moment, because in the next moment, everything would change. Thus, we would need to establish this level of knowledge for every single moment uninterrupted across time, for us to be able to furnish an observation that could establish an absolute law considered to be a fundamental quality of reality/the universe. It is that which is absent of experience and simply is. The only thing that escapes or is not part of reality is our interpretation itself. This will be understood momentarily. The observer is indeed a piece of reality, as the physical body, but the observer's viewpoint is not. As if this task was not already clearly impossible, there is yet another fundamental problem that makes this even more of an impossibility for us. There is always a moment in between the smallest unit of measurement for moments we can conceive of. Example. If the shortest moment conceivable is a millisecond, which it is not, we can always reduce this by cutting it in half. Half of a millisecond is shorter time span than a millisecond. In this manner, the reduction of the span of a moment can go on for infinity, and we can never get to the smallest degree of the span of a moment, an indivisible moment. And so, we could never technically establish an observation in regard to reality, because any observation would not be able to take into account the measurements from in between what we classify as moments, as described by a specific unit of time. There would always be data missing from the moment in between the moments we are taking into consideration. One can argue, well, of course we cannot understand reality/the universe in this manner. After all, we are not omniscient, but we can and do indeed understand reality via the models we have established. These models prove that we understand reality because time and time again, their predictions are accurate. If we did not understand reality, how could we accomplish this? This argument works based on the premise that because we can establish prediction, it is given that we understand reality/the universe, what the prediction is based on. However, where there is a logic break is in that what the user of the model assumes is the basis for said model reality/the universe is actually not so. The user here assumes that the model is based on the universe/reality, when this is actually not the case. The model does indeed work wonderfully and does predict the behavior of what it is based on accurately, but this is not what many believe it to be. This is a truth that the scientific community, for the most part, knows quite well, but that the majority of us outside this field of study are unaware of. The complete clarification on this and the unveiling of what these predictive models actually are based on is covered in Chapter 1.5. Establishing what we do not experience. Conclusion. We now hopefully see the impossibility of experiencing reality. What we are experiencing, what we are engaged in, is indeed not this. And so, we have succeeded in establishing that we in truth do not know what we are experiencing. How our analysis relates to reality. However, our analysis cannot ignore reality, since reality is what is. We do not experience reality, but we ourselves are indeed a part of reality. Reality serves as the background in which humans exist, along with everything else, and, consequently, in which our life experience takes place. In order to discover the aforementioned, we must begin working with the information we have developed throughout this analysis. Ironically, while we were covering what we do not experience, we actually came across one of the inputs that results in experience itself. This input is the information our sense organs pick up from their interaction with the environment. This undoubtedly is a component that is ultimately responsible for the experience itself. As of now, we do not yet know what we are experiencing, but we do have one of the inputs that results in experience itself. As such, let us skip to step 2 for now and dedicate our analysis to finding the inputs that constitute experience itself. In this manner, we will hopefully gain enough understanding to determine what it is we are experiencing. Although we will skip step 2 for now, we inadvertently also took care of step 3. While we were discussing the point that we do not experience reality, we established reality/the universe as being the totality by definition. Reality is everything that is. This makes sense as we do not understand, nor can we affect reality/the universe itself in a conscious and meaningful manner. Remember that for something to be the totality, we cannot be aware of how to directly affect this. Consequently, we indirectly demonstrated that experience itself is indeed not the totality, as there can be only one totality. Thus, we are capable of consciously affecting its inputs. Things might not always go in the order we expect them to, but sometimes the surprises are nice as well. Let us continue our search for the inputs that result in experience itself. All we are missing now is the remainder of the inputs, step 4, along with step 2, which is what we are experiencing. Upon learning what all the inputs are, along with what we are experiencing, and how these two interact, we will be able to affect the inputs in a conscious manner in order to bring about a meaningful change to our life experience. In other words, we will gain the capacity to direct our life experience as we see fit. Download the complete book in order to follow along from the website. The link is in both the video and the channel description. Thank you so much.